Hello, I am recording this video during Trans Awareness Week 2024. This is a week that occurs every year. We're not called 2024, of course, every year, but with the same intention, really to raise awareness around trans issues, to educate the public about who we are, that we are not to be feared, and to also raise awareness around the very high levels of discrimination and violence that people in the trans community often suffer. The week is a build-up to the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is another annual event, which has now been running for, 30 years, I think. Let me just check. Yes, started in 1999, so there you go, that's 35 years. Originally set up to remember a transgender woman, Rita Hester, who had been murdered back in the late 1990s. And this was in the form of a vigil commemorating her death. It's since grown into a global awareness day on which those who have been victims of trans crime and those, sadly, who have died, either being murdered or subject to very violent victimization or through suicide, to really hold their memory, those that have sadly paid the ultimate price, have lost their lives simply for being trans. There are a number of websites and organizations that monitor known reported cases, which are very likely to be underestimates of people who have been killed, trans people who have been killed because of their sexuality. Last year, 2023, according to the Trans Murder Monitoring Report, 320 people were murdered. Now, actually, if we take suicide into account as well, and again, this is only just where it is very clearly known that bullying for being trans or some other factor for being trans was the primary reason for individuals taking their own life, that number raises to 440. Some parts of the world are particularly transphobic, so more than 30% of all recorded murders worldwide took place in Brazil and the Caribbean and Latin America, and to a lesser extent, the southern states of the US record gruesomely high statistics. Victimization has also included rape, sexual assault, aggravated assault, damage to individuals' property, ostracism, and taking many other forms, being really hounded in awful ways online. Now, if you're coming to this video sometime after this event, that really doesn't matter. The principles stay the same about raising awareness and remembering those who have died, honoring them. Remembrance Day will take place on the 20th of November. That's the day set aside each year for this particular event. We know that the trans spectrum is very broad. Often, and I think this is the case with these statistics, it doesn't include cross-dressers, because the trans umbrella for some requires the individual to have gender dysphoria. In other words, an ongoing, consistent mismatch between their identity or how they feel they want to express themselves in terms of their gender and the physical sex, the body they were born into. However, I also would include anyone that has, let's say, trans tendencies, albeit temporarily. That includes people like myself who are gender fluid, and I would say it also includes those who are cross-streamers or those who may from time to time want to cross-dress. So this is really a part of what I think needs to be appealed to, that we make people aware that the trans spectrum is broad. And for those of us who are comfortable coming out and speaking about it with others, certainly I've had a number of conversations in recent days with friends around this. Perhaps it helps them to understand something they may know very little about, and any opinions they may have may be biased by what are often quite prejudiced media reports or portrayals of trans people in the media. Realizing that we are not people to be feared, and perhaps realizing something about this condition. We are living, certainly in the society I'm in the UK, and I know there is very severe concerns about the rights and access to medical support and more for trans people in the US, and in many parts of the world, at a time when this debate has really raised up to a very, very prominent level in our societies, and where trans people especially are often the victims of abuse. Some of that is on online trolling, but there have been some appalling cases. One of the stories of the murdered trans person who was only 14 years of age in the UK last year that I read reported that their mother had been receiving really vicious, nasty mail and social media harassment following the death of her daughter. That's just one example. So I think if for those of us that can, to be able to express ourselves and help others who know us, perhaps, who trust us, to see that this isn't something to be feared, and to help educate them is certainly something that would fall under this appeal for Trans Awareness Week. We might also make time to just be silent and remember those and their families who have been victimized or who are being victimized, and including those on Transgender Day of Remembrance who have been murdered or taken their own lives. I, among many other people, am hosting a vigil on that day. You should be able to find out events going on online, or indeed you can just set aside time to do this yourself. If you're like me and you have a faith tradition, then this will become a prayerful activity as well, to hold the memory of those who have died, to hold those who are still suffering and their families. And I think we can also perhaps send some compassion and a desire in our prayers for those of us who are this way inclined to the transcritical as well, perhaps for there to be a more respectful dialogue and listening between, as it were, the different sides in the trans debate, and for an end to all of this nastiness, this harassment, and this appalling trolling that goes on online. So that would be one of my main appeals for compassion and understanding. And we might hope too, and I think there are some very promising signs here that we're seeing this in some of the actors and so on that are appearing in trans movies and being nominated for acting awards and so on. The portrayal of trans people, happily including by trans people themselves in some cases, probably not enough yet, is seemingly moving in a reasonably positive direction. So willing for that to continue as well. Let's be present for all who are suffering or have suffered, to listen to and offer our support as well for those who are feeling victimized. My contact details, if you're in that category, you want to talk to someone, obviously depending on my availability, then please do reach out. Bless you. I'd like to say enjoy this week, but may it be a time of blessing, a time in which perhaps slowly, perhaps hopefully much more significantly, this level of awareness and the remembrance, which is so important to keep alive, of those who have passed, will take us maybe a small step forward.